You know, I was just thinking about that in the studio before I came down here, and I think the first time I met Sid was at a Saturday morning art class.
Roger Waters, a powerful voice from rock history, is holding nothing back, revealing 5 bands he says are a disgrace to true rock and roll. He always looked for music with a real punch and important messages. Sadly, many popular songs today leave him cold or super angry. Tune in, if you dare, to discover the bands Roger Waters believes have betrayed the very soul of music. First, U2. This story of dislike isn't one that started with instant hatred. Instead, it began with a small amount of hope, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, this band could carry the torch. In the early 1980s, the Irish band U2 exploded onto the music scene. Their powerful sound and big ideas made many people think they could be the natural followers of Pink Floyd's kind of politically charged, thought-provoking rock. U2 tackled important subjects in their songs, they played on huge stages in massive stadiums, and they attracted giant crowds of people who seemed hungry for music that had real meaning.
I would have taken, anything. I was ready to be in the road crew, and but I don't deal with the gear very well.
But Roger Waters, watching all of this happen, saw something entirely different. From his point of view, what looked to many like passionate belief and strong conviction was just very skilled acting. He listened to Bono's famous speeches during concerts, the ones where he'd talk about changing the world, and Waters didn't hear a genuine call to action. He heard empty words, like a stage performance, a sermon delivered by someone who wasn't willing to make any real personal sacrifices for the causes they were talking about. And the music itself? Waters felt it was overproduced, too polished, scrubbed clean of any real dirt or grit, and in the end, disappointingly safe. It lacked the dangerous edge he believed true rock should have.
Dude, but when you were kids?
We're one of their biggest influences.
Yeah.
What truly turned Waters' private disappointment into a burning anger, what made him openly disgusted, was how much praise U2 was getting from everyone. Music critics were calling them things like the conscience of rock music. Fans were even starting to compare U2's hugely successful album, The Joshua Tree, to Pink Floyd's own legendary and deeply personal masterpiece, The Wall.
When we got together, we weren't musicians, at all. We're not professional musicians even now, probably, even though we get paid.
For Roger Waters, this wasn't just a bad comparison. It felt deeply offensive, almost like someone was speaking badly of something sacred. He knew what had gone into The Wall. He saw it as a raw, painful scream that came from the very depths of his soul. A brave and unflinching look at personal breakdown. A desperate cry coming from a place of real darkness and isolation. In sharp contrast, he viewed The Joshua Tree as little more than a collection of very catchy stadium songs, cleverly dressed up to look sincere and important. He thought it was a commercial product, a parade of hits designed to sell records, all disguised as a profound artistic statement. So, while many people saw a band that was speaking truth to power and challenging the status quo, Waters saw a massive ego hidden behind expensive designer sunglasses. He saw a band flying around in private jets, going from one glamorous charity event to the next, talking a very good game about changing the world, but, in his opinion, actually changing very little.
And an hour before we were due to go on stage, they cornered me and said,
The absolute breaking point, the exact moment when his quiet private doubts about U2 hardened into open and lasting disdain, happened during one of their concerts in London. Waters, who always kept a close eye on what was happening in the world of rock music, decided he should go and see them perform live. Maybe it was out of some small leftover curiosity, or perhaps he just needed to see for himself what all the fuss was about. While U2's perceived emptiness was a fairly modern letdown for Waters, his critical eye also fell sharply upon legendary bands from his own generation. 2. The Rolling Stones. There was a definite period, a golden age of rock, when the Rolling Stones were seen by almost everyone as the absolute embodiment of rock and roll rebellion. And Roger Waters, like so many others who grew up in that era, deeply felt their incredible power and influence. If you go back to the 1960s, who didn't look up to the Stones with a sense of awe? They had an undeniable, cool swagger about them. They possessed a raw, blues-soaked soul that felt completely authentic, and there was a palpable sense of real danger woven into their electrifying guitar riffs.
On the production that we do in America, we try and do the same production with less people.
They somehow managed to make chaos sound incredibly cool, thrillingly edgy, and absolutely irresistible. They were the ultimate rock and roll outlaws. But, as the years turned into decades, Roger Waters began to see a significant change in the Rolling Stones, a slow but steady shift that deeply troubled his sense of what a great rock band should stand for. That once razor-sharp cutting edge that had defined their sound and their attitude seemed to grow noticeably dull over time. Their concert tours became massive, sprawling, multi-million-dollar productions, but their original core message, their rebellious anti-establishment spark, seemed to get lost and forgotten somewhere amidst the dazzling, blinding lighting rigs and the mountains of expensive designer band merchandise.
And doing them all live would take an immense amount of rehearsal.
Yeah.
Really, for a live show, such as they used to be some years ago, it would take...
In Roger Waters' critical view, the Rolling Stones stopped being a band that actively challenged the world and its injustices. Instead, he believed, they transformed into a band that was simply cashing in on their own legendary status. The raw, honest blues sound that had once been the very heart and soul of their music, giving them their authenticity, slowly but surely turned into a highly polished, predictable, and well-rehearsed stage routine. He no longer saw them as the vibrant, dangerous, and groundbreaking artists they had once been. Instead, he viewed them as mere caricatures of their former glorious selves, rock stars who had willingly traded their original, hard-earned grit for easy showbiz glitz, and swapped their powerful, meaningful protest for comfortable, easy profit. Their albums from later in their career, in his honest and often harsh opinion, felt like nothing more than hollow, empty echoes of their past glory.
During those very early days, just while the Beatles were recording their first songs, it was a real wasteland.
These later songs lacked the fire, the passion, and the urgency that had once so clearly defined their best and most important work. This wasn't just a personal dislike on Waters' part, he would often argue. It was a deeply felt matter of artistic principle. He strongly believed that a band with the Stones' immense global power and widespread influence had a continuing moral responsibility to keep pushing boundaries, to keep questioning authority, and to keep speaking uncomfortable truths. Instead, he felt they had made a conscious choice to sell comfort, nostalgia, and a safe, predictable version of rock and roll. This underlying friction wasn't just some abstract philosophical disagreement that Waters pondered in private. It actually boiled over into a very real and tense situation. There's a well-known story that circulates about an incident backstage at a large European music festival back in the 1990s. Roger Waters was reportedly involved in a clash with some members of the Rolling Stones road crew. The disagreement was said to be over practical things, like the performance schedule for the bands and the allocated times for sound checks. However, tensions escalated significantly when one of the Rolling Stones tour managers apparently dismissed Roger Waters and his music as being too political for the festival's audience. That particular comment, that dismissive slight, deeply offended Waters and stuck with him for a long time.
On the last American tour, well, I mean, we didn't finish it until this year. But we wrote the melody. Keith wrote the melody.
If the Rolling Stones represented a once great revolution that had disappointingly sold its soul for money and fame, another hugely popular band never even bothered to pretend to have a revolution to sell in the first place. 3. Coldplay. As Roger Waters surveyed the wide and varied landscape of modern rock music, one particular band seemed to perfectly and unfortunately represent almost everything he firmly believed true rock music should never ever be: That band was Coldplay. He once famously, and with a great deal of clear dismissal in his tone, referred to them as the soundtrack to shopping malls. This wasn't a compliment. In his highly critical eyes, their music was far, far too clean, meticulously engineered to be too careful, and above all, completely and utterly safe. It was, he felt, music that was emotionally lukewarm at best, entirely stripped of any real sense of danger, excitement, or genuine bite. The kind of predictable, inoffensive music that simply fades into the background hum of everyday life. Roger Waters saw their very carefully crafted sound not as the result of a genuine artistic purpose or a deep-seated need to express something vital, but rather as clever commercial packaging, specifically designed for easy, unthinking consumption by the masses.
It's the only chat show we've ever chatted on.
He never made any attempt to hide his strong and vocal contempt for the kind of pop-rock music that seemed deliberately tailor-made to blend seamlessly and unnoticeably into the background noise of public spaces like elevators, or to be used in glossy tech company advertisements and on harmless, non-challenging radio playlists.
We realised that we'd been working quite disparately, and we played together in a space not much bigger than this carpet.
Coldplay, with their often soft, pastel-colored stage visuals, their relentlessly shimmering and often unconvincing optimism, and their catalog of stadium-sized anthems of general niceness, became a prime and frequent target for his sharp criticism. To him, listening to their music felt like someone offering you a soft, comforting blanket while your house was engulfed in a raging fire. A pleasant enough gesture, perhaps, but utterly useless, deeply inappropriate, and completely disconnected from the urgent and often harsh reality of the situation.
It's perceived as being much harsher than it actually is, because these there's all the publications in Britain that they can be really harsh.
What truly infuriated Roger Waters about Coldplay wasn't necessarily their enormous global popularity. After all, many bands he deeply respected had also achieved massive popularity. It was what he perceived as their profound and echoing emptiness. He heard songs that were clearly and meticulously built for huge stadium crowds to sing along to in unison. But to him, these songs were fundamentally hollow at their very core. Their big, soaring choruses often aimed for a feeling of togetherness and unity. But underneath all that surface-level positivity, Waters heard a disturbing undercurrent of apathy, a profound lack of real, meaningful engagement with the serious problems of the world.
But the spirit of your singing, the spirit of John singing is...
In Coldplay's music, Waters found no discernible edge, no sense of true urgency, just a kind of vaguely feel-good noise that seemed designed for people who were perhaps too tired, too overwhelmed, or too distracted by modern life to really care about what was actually happening around them.
Well, it's not quite... Who's the guy that jumped out of the bath? Archimedes?
Yeah, Eureka, man.
Eureka.
And while the world, as Roger Waters consistently saw it, was metaphorically and sometimes literally burning, consumed by conflict, riddled with corruption, and teetering on the edge of societal collapse, Coldplay seemed to float serenely and untroubled above it all. They rarely, if ever, named specific names in their songs, never directly challenged the prevailing chaos or confronted the powerful forces that he believed were causing so much harm. Coldplay's safety was one major artistic sin in Waters' book, but another popular band drew his ire for taking the powerful style of rebellion and completely missing its entire, essential soul. Quarta Muse. In the considered and often harsh judgment of Roger Waters, the rock band Muse served as a kind of living, breathing cautionary tale within the sprawling world of contemporary rock music. He tended to see them as a group that possessed all the necessary technical skills, all the undeniably impressive and visually spectacular stagecraft, and all the powerful sonic tools readily available at their disposal.
There's also, actually, weirdly enough, there's a gaming thing that emerged whilst making the album that...
However, in his critical opinion, They were glaringly deficient in the one ingredient he considered absolutely essential for any true artist: genuine, unvarnished truth. Their live concert performances were globally famous for dazzling audiences with breathtaking futuristic light shows and an absolutely massive wall of sound that could shake stadiums to their foundations. But to Roger Waters, it often felt like an overwhelming amount of noise without any real, discernible, or underlying soul.
So from the age of like 17, 18, 19, 20 really, even 21.
He frequently viewed their very image-heavy style, their penchant for futuristic and sometimes outlandish outfits, and their often grand, sweeping pronouncements as little more than a clever and calculated distraction. He believed this was all designed to draw attention away from what he perceived as a fundamental and disappointing lack of true substance and depth in their actual songs.
Be able to dedicate my life to music was something that would be enough, you know?
He noted that their lyrics often flirted with themes of rebellion or hinted at deep social commentary, but they never seemed to fully commit to these ideas. They never truly dug deep into the complex issues they touched upon, and it all felt a bit too safe, too cautious, and too carefully calculated for Roger Waters' taste. He didn't hesitate to openly accuse Muse of deliberately and superficially mimicking the renowned grandeur of his own former band, Pink Floyd. He pointed to their use of big, sweeping cinematic soundscapes, the dramatic and often lengthy build-ups and crescendos in their songs, and their exploration of dark, brooding, and serious themes. But, critically, he felt they were consistently missing the key elements that had made Pink Floyd's music so powerful and enduring: the raw, unfiltered, genuine emotion, the deep sense of palpable anguish, and the metaphorical blood, sweat, and tears that had always so clearly fueled his own artistic work.
And I think their impact was huge. And I think also their political content, their political statements.
For Roger Waters, the concept of rebellion wasn't just a cool aesthetic to adopt, a fashionable mood to strike for a particular song, or a trendy image to project. It was, for him, something much deeper and more personal. It was like a scar, earned from real-life experience, authentic struggle, and unwavering conviction. It was something that had to come from a place of profound personal engagement with the world's many injustices and hypocrisies. He simply didn't see or feel that same level of authentic struggle, deep-seated commitment, or willingness to expose personal vulnerability in Muse's music. According to reports from behind the scenes, there was also some palpable tension on a more personal level. The information available tells of a specific charity event where both Roger Waters and Muse were scheduled to perform on the same bill. Waters apparently made a point of questioning why Muse had been given the prestigious headlining slot for the evening. His reasoning was that he felt their underlying message was far too shallow and that they hadn't earned the right to such a prime spot on the bill. He believed that the spotlight of a headlining performance should be reserved for artists who had truly real, substantive, and important things to say to the world through their music, not just those who could put on a visually impressive show. While Muse merely copied the superficial appearance of depth and rebellion, another band represented a kind of rock music that was simply disappointing. 5. Imagine Dragons. When the conversation turns to the massively popular band Imagine Dragons, Roger Waters didn't just express a mild or reasoned disapproval. He reportedly met the very notion of them being considered a serious or legitimate rock band with open, undisguised disbelief, and even a touch of scorn.
Ended up getting kicked out of BYU, which is like the Mormon college that you go to.
When a journalist asked him about Imagine Dragons in an interview, he is said to have laughed out loud, but it was not a kind or amused laugh. It was a laugh that dripped with derision. "Are we really calling this rock?" he reportedly responded, raising a skeptical eyebrow, as if the question itself was a personal insult or a sign of the interviewer's complete lack of musical understanding. To him, the music of Imagine Dragons was the sonic equivalent of fast food. It was neatly and commercially packaged, utterly predictable in its structure and sound, and clearly mass-produced with the primary goal of achieving maximum palatability for the widest possible audience. They were, in his highly critical and uncompromising eyes, the absolute and perfect embodiment of a completely commercialized and ultimately fake form of rebellion.
And I think especially with ankylosing spondylitis, because it's, you know, a disease.
He listened to their soaring, anthemic choruses, the kind designed to get huge crowds singing along, but he found no real sense of conflict, no meaningful struggle, and no challenging ideas contained within them. They certainly made very loud songs, songs that could fill massive arenas with sheer volume, but in his firmly held opinion, these loud songs had absolutely nothing important or substantive to say about the human condition or the state of the world.
The album really dives into kind of those concepts, so we felt like that was the right.
It was the kind of music, he often argued, that could easily fill up the biggest stadiums with thousands of cheering fans, but would, at the exact same time, completely empty those very same songs of any lasting meaning, depth, or significant impact. He didn't see them as a genuine band driven by a unique artistic vision or a burning need to express something vital. Instead, he viewed them as a carefully constructed and marketed brand. They were, in his assessment, a commercial product, cleverly wrapped up in the guise of electric guitars and bright, flashy neon lights, all perfectly tailored to please radio algorithms, perform well on streaming playlists, and provide suitably exciting, non-controversial entertainment for big events like Super Bowl halftime shows.
Gone to a couple seminars, and that's where my mindset was. But it's funny because my mom.
Roger Waters, a man whose own musical legacy was built on writing songs that powerfully and fearlessly protested against the horrors of war, the dangers of government surveillance, and the pervasive madness he saw in society, looked at a band like Imagine Dragons and saw a group that seemed to stand for absolutely nothing of consequence, yet somehow, frustratingly, still managed to be incredibly popular and seemingly everywhere. It wasn't just that he felt their music fundamentally lacked any real substance or depth, it was that he also believed they actively pretended to have it, and to Waters, that pretense was even worse than simply being shallow. There's nothing worse, he once famously stated, than packaging noise as revolution. He didn't just dislike their music on a superficial sonic level, he deeply and profoundly disdained what they, as a cultural phenomenon, represented to him. He saw them as a prime example of the steady and depressing erosion of any real, meaningful message in popular music, all sacrificed in favor of what sells best and what is most marketable. They signified to him the sad and ultimate triumph of slick, superficial style over genuine, heartfelt soul. Roger Waters has always demanded much more from music, more courage, more truth, more real fire. Do you agree with Roger, or do you think he made a huge mistake choosing them? Share your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.